Thank you, Mark. Let's give it up for Mark. Thank you for being here. For Cheryl and all those kids who were up here on stage a moment ago. And for all of you, I can't tell you how glad I am to be off of Capitol Hill and with all of you here in the free state of Maryland. And the reason we are all here is because our kids can't wait. So I think I see people all the way back to the bridge. Is that right? Thousands of Marylanders standing up to make sure that every child in Maryland can go to the very best school in the world. I see students, I see teachers, I see educators, I see parents, I see people from all walks of life who are committed to being here, because right here in Annapolis at this hour, this is the most important place anyone in Maryland can be, because the most important responsibility we have is to make sure our kids get a top-notch education. And when we say our children, our students, we mean every single one of them. It doesn't matter where you live in Maryland. It doesn't matter whether it's a city or a town or a zip code. It doesn't matter whether you live in a big house or a little house. It doesn't matter whether you have a big bank account, a middle-sized one, or none at all. Every single child deserves the same equal and best education of every other child. Now, we know in our country we have an education funding system that at its very core is unfair. At its very core, it's inequitable, because our school funding systems are based on a property tax. That means if you come from a really wealthy county or a wealthy neighborhood, you can afford to put more of your local resources into your schools. That is why the state of Maryland and the federal government have to jump in to address that fundamental inequity at the core of our funding system. Now, it was about 10 years ago that the gentleman that you heard from a moment ago, Dr. Thornton, came up with a plan. And the reason he came up with a plan was back around the year 2000, Maryland's highest court, Maryland's Court of Appeals, looked at Maryland's school funding and decided two things. They concluded that the education we were giving our kids was both inequitable and inadequate. Not enough resources, and the resources weren't being spent fairly under the Maryland Constitution. And so that's why we passed the Thornton Commission right here back in 2000, when people all over the state spoke and stood up like you are this evening. But we're 2 decades past that, and a lot has changed since then, and the needs have grown since then, and even as the needs have grown, the number of resources provided have gone down compared to what was promised. And so we're all back to say Maryland needs to take the next step forward when it comes to funding our schools and making sure we respect and treat our teachers with dignity. Are we going to do that? So that's why we had the Kerwin Commission. And the Kerwin Commission looked at Maryland schools, and they've made some very alarming findings. Findings that are unacceptable for all of us, and that's why we need to change things. So, for example, we cannot and will not accept a world where less than 40% of our students are career and college ready when they graduate from high school. We will not accept that. We will not and cannot accept a world where more than half of our African American students go to schools that are underfunded. That is unacceptable. And we cannot and will not accept a system where almost half of our teachers leave the profession after just their second year of teaching. That is unacceptable. So that's why we're here tonight, because we're going to do something about it. And I want to thank the legislative leaders. I want to thank State President, Senate President Mike Miller, and Speaker Bush, and all the legislators, because they have put in a legislation to do the right thing and adopt the recommendations of the Kirwan Commission, and we need to adopt and pass every single one of them. We need to do that so our kids get the very best education in the world, every one of them. We need to do that to make sure that teachers are treated with respect and dignity. And we need to do that because in our country, we have to meet the promise of equal opportunity for all. And you can't meet the promise of equal opportunity for all if we don't have an equal high-quality education for all. And finally, we're going to send our children, these students, out in the world, a very competitive world. A world where others are going to school across the globe and getting good educations, and it's not acceptable that American schools are finding themselves just somewhere in the middle of the pack compared to the schools of so many other countries. And it's not acceptable that Maryland schools are finding themselves in the middle of the pack here in the United States of America. We can do a whole lot better. And just good enough isn't good enough. We have to do the best. So let's go forth from here. Make sure that you talk to every single state senator, every single member of the House of Delegates. Let's get it passed here, and let's send it to the governor, and let's make sure we pass this effort to make our schools the very best, and let's do it this year. And I will just close with this. The Congress has to do its job too. And in the coming weeks, I will reintroduce a bill that requires the United States government to live up to the promises it has made to our kids. It's called the Keep Our Pact Act, Keep Our Promises to America's Children and Teachers. Thank you all for being here. Let's get it done. Let's fund our schools for these kids. Thank you.